and I didn't say a word. Not one. My brother called me a coward for it. My sister said I must have lost my mind. Even my own mother, God rest her, would have been horrified by my silence. But I knew something they didn't. I knew what was coming. Let me go back to the beginning. My son Miles got married on a Saturday in late September, out at a vineyard, about 40 minutes east of Kingston. It was one of those days that only Ontario knows how to make. The maples were already turning, that deep red and orange that looks almost unreal. And the light came through the trees sideways in the late afternoon like something out of a painting. Carol and I had driven up the evening before and stayed at a small inn nearby. We had dinner alone, just the two of us, and she held my hand across the table and said, "I just want today to be good for him." That was Carol. After everything that woman had been through with Miles's girlfriend, I should say, his fiancée at that point, she still just wanted the day to be good for her son. I should explain about Miles. He was 31 when he got married. Smart kid. Degree in civil engineering from Queens. Good job with a firm in Ottawa, working on infrastructure contracts. We were proud of him. Still are, though for different reasons now than we used to be. He had a good head on his shoulders for most of his life, right up until he met Serena. Serena came from money. Real money. The kind that gets quiet about itself after a generation or two. Her father had sold a logistics company sometime in the early 2000s, and the family had been comfortable ever since. They lived in a large house in Westboro, tasteful, nothing flashy, but the kind of house where everything is just slightly better than it needs to be. Serena had grown up in that house knowing, without anyone ever having to say it directly, that she was the kind of person things worked out for. She was not unkind exactly. When Carol and I first met her, she was polite, studied polite, the kind that takes more effort than warmth does, and you can feel the effort underneath it. She asked me questions about my work, nodded at the right moments, complimented Carol on her earrings, but there was something behind the eyes that I couldn't quite name at the time. I would name it later. It was assessment. The whole time she was talking to us, she was measuring. Miles had been with her for almost 2 years before they got engaged. In that time, there had been small things. A comment Serena made at Christmas about the neighborhood Carol and I live in. Not cruel, just the particular kind of observational remark that a person makes when they want you to know they've noticed something about you. A moment at Miles's birthday dinner when Serena redirected the conversation away from a story Carol was telling, not obviously, but decisively. The way she would reference plans she and Miles had made, without mentioning they had been made, until it was too late for us to be included. None of it was a crime. None of it was the kind of thing you could point to and say, "This is the problem." It was a pattern. And patterns only become visible once you have enough of the pieces. Carol noticed before I did. She's always been better at that than me. She mentioned it once carefully, one evening after Miles and Serena had come for dinner and left earlier than expected. She said, "I don't think she likes me." I told her she was reading too much into things. I told her Serena was just reserved. Carol looked at me with that particular patience she has. The kind that doesn't argue, just waits, and didn't say anything else about it. I wish I had listened. The engagement happened in February. Miles proposed at some restaurant in the Glebe and called us that same night. He was happy, genuinely happy, and I was happy for him. Carol was too, whatever reservations she had quietly kept them to herself. We celebrated with them the following weekend, dinner at a nice place in the market, and Serena sat across from Carol the whole evening with that studied politeness, and I thought, this is fine. People warm up. Families take time. Planning the wedding was where things started to deteriorate in ways that were harder to ignore. Serena made it clear, early on, that she had a vision. That's a reasonable thing. It's her wedding. But the vision left very little room for input from our side, and the few times Carol offered a suggestion, gentle things, small things, the kind a mother offers, because she wants to feel connected to the moment, Serena would listen, nod, and then simply continue as though Carol hadn't spoken. Miles would look at his plate. He had developed, over the 2 years he'd been with Serena, a particular habit of looking at his plate. There was a conversation about the seating arrangement. Serena wanted the immediate families at separate tables, her parents and siblings at one, Carol and me at another with Miles's aunt and uncle and a couple of cousins. Carol mentioned quietly that it might be nice to have the two families together at the head table, or at least nearby. Serena said with complete pleasantness, "I just think it flows better this way." Miles said nothing. Carol said nothing more. I noticed. The rehearsal dinner was the night before the wedding. Serena's parents hosted it at their home in Westboro, and it was a beautiful evening, objectively. Beautiful house, beautiful food, beautiful flowers, beautiful everything. Serena's mother was gracious and warm in the way of someone who has hosted many things and is good at it. Her father, Douglas, shook my hand twice and forgot my name once, which I thought was probably honest. Serena, the night before her own wedding, was in a kind of controlled elation. Happy, but the happiness had an edge to it, like she was managing it carefully. At some point during the dinner, Carol went to find the bathroom, and I watched Serena watch her go. That was the moment, though I didn't understand it fully until later. There was something in Serena's expression, just for a second, before her face went back to its usual composure, that I recognized. It was the same look I'd seen on certain people at work over the years. Just before they did something they had already decided to do. I should have left early. I should have taken Carol home. The wedding was at 4 in the afternoon the following day. The vineyard had a beautiful old barn that had been converted into a reception hall, and the ceremony was outside under the trees. It really was a perfect setting. I remember thinking, standing there watching Miles at the front, that he looked more settled than I'd seen him in years. Whatever I thought about Serena, he loved her. That part was real. Carol cried during the vows. She always cries at things like that. I handed her my handkerchief and she laughed a little through the tears the way she does, and I thought, whatever happens, this moment is good. The reception started well. The food was excellent, a local caterer, some kind of harvest menu that suited the season. The speeches were long but heartfelt. Miles's best friend, a guy named Pete, who I've known since they were 12, gave a speech that had the whole room laughing. Serena's maid of honor gave one that was slightly too composed to be funny, but got polite applause. Miles thanked his in-laws, he thanked his friends, he thanked Serena's grandmother who had flown in from Vancouver. He thanked Carol and me last, at the end of a long list, with the words he might have used to thank a colleague who'd done him a favor. Not bad words, just thin. Carol reached over and squeezed my hand under the table, and I didn't look at her because I didn't want her to see my face. It was about an hour into the dancing when it happened. Carol had gotten up to go speak to my sister Marguerite, who was seated across the room with her husband. I watched her make her way through the tables, stopping to speak to a few people she knew. She was wearing a dark blue dress, and she had her hair up the way she does for events, and she looked lovely, is the truth of it. She was happy. Despite everything, she was trying to be happy for her son. Serena came from the other side of the room. I don't know what Carol said. Knowing Carol, it was something small, a compliment about the flowers or a comment about the food. Something gentle, an olive branch. What I saw was Serena stop, something to Carol that I couldn't hear across the noise and the music, and then lean in closer. And then Carol's expression changed. It changed the way a person's expression changes when they've been hit somewhere they didn't see coming. And then Serena turned and walked back toward the dance floor. I was moving before I had consciously decided to move. By the time I reached Carol, her hand was pressed to her cheek. Not her face, her cheek. She looked at me with an expression I had never seen on my wife's face in 34 years of marriage. It was shock, but it was also something else. It was the particular shock of a person who has been proven right about something they desperately wished they'd been wrong about. "She hit me," Carol said, very quietly. I looked around. A few people at the nearby tables had noticed something. One of the women at the table closest to us, I didn't know her, one of Serena's friends, had gone very still. Serena was already on the far side of the room, her hand on Miles's arm, leaning up to say something in his ear. Whatever she said, Miles looked toward us once, and then away. He looked away. I will carry that moment for the rest of my life. The image of my son looking at his mother, with her hand pressed to her cheek at his wedding, and then looking away. I put my hand on Carol's arm. I said, "Let's get your things." She looked at me. She said, "Dennis," in that way she has of turning my name into a question. I said, "Let's get your things." We collected her wrap from the back of her chair. We got our coats from the coat check near the entrance. I stopped at Marguerite's table and told her we were leaving, that I'd explain later. She started to ask something, and I shook my head once. She closed her mouth. We walked out of that vineyard, and we got in our car, and we drove to the inn in the dark, and the whole drive Carol sat with her hand, still pressed to her cheek, even though there was no reason to anymore. And she didn't cry, and I didn't say anything, and the maples were invisible now in the darkness outside the windows. Miles called my cell phone before we reached the inn. I let it go to voicemail. He called again. I let it go. Carol looked out the passenger window the whole time. She never said a word about me not answering. She understood. At the inn, I sat Carol down on the edge of the bed and I looked at her face in the proper light. There was a mark. Not severe, but there. A real mark. I took a photograph. Carol looked at me when I did it. She didn't ask why. She already knew. I didn't sleep much that night. I lay in the dark in that inn room and I listened to Carol breathe beside me, and I thought about a lot of things. I thought about Miles at 12 years old, crying in the car after he struck out in a baseball game, and me telling him that the people who handle failure with dignity are the same ones who handle success without arrogance. I thought about all the things I had taught him, about what it means to be a man in the world, what it means to stand beside the people who love you. I thought about his face at that reception table when he looked at his mother and then looked away. And I thought about what I was going to do about it. I am not a person who acts in anger. I never have been. My father was, and I watched what it cost him, and I made a decision young that I would not be the same. But there is a difference between reacting in anger and acting with purpose. I have always understood the difference. That night, lying in that inn room, I was not angry. I was very, very calm, and in that calm, I made a plan. In the morning, Carol and I had breakfast at the little dining room downstairs. She had tea and I had coffee, and we split an order of eggs, and neither of us spoke much. After a while, she said, "What are you going to do?" And I said, "Nothing yet." She looked at me. "Nothing yet," she repeated. "That's right." She nodded, slowly. She trusted me. She has always trusted me, even when I gave her no reason to yet. That trust is the most valuable thing I possess. We drove home to Ottawa that morning. Miles called 3 more times. I did not answer. Carol's phone rang twice from an unknown number. Serena, I assumed, or possibly Serena's mother. Carol set the phone face down on her lap and watched the highway. It was 2 weeks before I heard from my son directly. Not by phone. He came to the house. He rang the doorbell on a Tuesday evening in October, just after dinner, and I answered the door and looked at my son standing on my front porch and felt something complicated happen in my chest. I let him in. We sat at the kitchen table. Carol was in the living room. Miles knew she was there. He didn't go to her. He sat down across from me and he said, "Dad, I'm sorry about what happened at the reception." He said it the way a person says something they have rehearsed. I said, "Are you?" He said that Serena had been under enormous stress. He said the wedding planning had been overwhelming. He said she hadn't meant it the way it looked. He said things had been difficult. I let him say all of it. I have learned over the years to let people say all the things they have prepared to say before I respond. It is more useful to know the whole of what someone has decided to say than to interrupt partway through and only know half of it. When he was finished, I said, "Your mother has a mark on her face in a photograph I took that night at the inn. That photograph is currently saved in 3 places." Miles looked at me. I said, "Your wife struck your mother at your wedding in front of approximately 200 guests. That is assault. I chose not to call the police that night. I made that choice deliberately, and I can make a different choice at any time." He started to say something. I held up one hand. "I'm not finished. What I need you to understand, Miles, is that what Serena did is not the part of that evening that I am least able to forgive. I have a harder time with what you did. You were 10 meters from your mother when it happened. You looked at her, and then you turned away." The kitchen was very quiet. I could hear Carol in the living room. I could hear the furnace running. "I'm not asking you to end your marriage," I said. "I am telling you what the situation is. Your mother has been patient and kind with Serena for 2 years. She did nothing to deserve what happened. And until you have stood in front of your mother, not me, your mother, and said that clearly, and until Serena has done the same, there is no relationship to repair here. Do you understand what I'm saying?" He said, "Yes." He didn't look at his plate this time. I'll give him that. He asked if he could go speak to Carol. I told him that was between him and his mother, and I walked out to the garage to give them the room. I don't know everything that was said between them. Carol told me some of it later. She said Miles cried. She said she held her son and cried too, because she is Carol and that is who she is, and I would not have it any other way. But she also told him, and this part she told me clearly, because she wanted me to know, that she needed more than words. She told him she needed to see it. In the weeks that followed, I went back to work and said nothing to anyone about what had happened. I am a senior project manager at a firm that does commercial property development across Eastern Ontario. I have worked there for 19 years. I am not a dramatic person, professionally. My reputation is built on being precise and measured and reliable, and I have cultivated that reputation deliberately over a long time. Among the projects currently in my portfolio was a residential development in Kannada, a mid-density townhouse project, 48 units, that had taken 3 years to get to where it was. We were at the pre-sale stage. The developer, a man named Harrison who had worked with our firm 3 times before, was preparing to go to market. Serena worked in marketing, specifically in real estate marketing, and this is the part that requires patience to arrive at. She had recently left a boutique agency and was in the early stages of building her own practice. And she had been, as Miles had mentioned casually over dinner the previous spring, hoping to land a significant residential development contract as her first anchor client. I had at that same dinner the previous spring said nothing. I had filed the information away the way I file most things. In November, Harrison's development went to market through a different marketing firm, a good one, established, with a track record on projects of that scale. I had recommended them to Harrison in September, about 3 weeks before the wedding. I had not done so to hurt Serena. At the time I made the recommendation, the situation with Carol hadn't happened yet. I had done so because they were simply the better choice for that project, and it was my professional obligation to give Harrison my honest assessment. But the timing meant that Serena found out in November that a contract she had been quietly hoping might come her way had gone elsewhere, on the recommendation of her father-in-law the month before her wedding. I did not orchestrate that. I want to be precise about this, because precision matters. I had not gone out of my way to sabotage her. What I had done was nothing. I had simply not extended the particular kind of informal, familial goodwill that might have led me to suggest her name instead. I had stayed in my professional lane. I had done my job. That is not sabotage. That is the absence of a favor. Serena understood the distinction, I think, because she was sharp. She called me once, in late November, from a number I didn't recognize. I answered. She said, "I think we need to talk, Dennis." I said, "I agree. You're welcome to come to the house." There was a long pause. She said, "Miles said you two already spoke." I said, "Miles and I have spoken, yes. But Miles isn't the one who owes my wife an apology." Another pause. "What do you want from me?" she said. "Nothing complicated," I said. "I want you to come to this house and say to Carol's face what you did and that you're sorry for it, specifically, not generally. And I want Miles to be there when you do it." She hung up. She called back 4 days later and said they could come on Saturday. They came on a Saturday in early December, a week before Christmas. Carol made coffee. I sat at the table. Miles and Serena sat across from us, and Serena looked, for the first time since I had known her, like a person who was not in control of the room she was in. It didn't make me feel triumphant. It made me feel tired. She apologized. She said the specific thing, that she had struck Carol, that there was no justification for it, that she was sorry. It wasn't the most eloquent apology I have ever heard, but she said it to Carol's face, with Miles beside her and me across the table, and Carol listened to the whole of it without looking away once. And when Serena was finished, Carol said, "Thank you for saying that." Just that. No performance, no conditions, no forgiveness speech. Just thank you for saying that. That's Carol. 34 years, and I am still in awe of her. We have not become a close family. I want to be honest about that. Miles and I have coffee a few times a year, and the conversations are careful and real, in the way that conversations between a father and son can be when something irreversible has happened, and both parties know it, and neither is pretending it hasn't. Serena is polite to Carol. Carol is polite to Serena. It is a long way from warm, and I don't know if it will ever get there. But there is something that happened at Christmas that year that I keep coming back to. We had dinner at our house. Miles and Serena, Marguerite and her husband, Carol and me. It was a normal dinner, mostly. Toward the end of the evening, Serena was helping Carol clear the table, and I watched through the kitchen doorway as Serena said something to Carol that I couldn't hear, and Carol paused for a moment and then laughed. A real laugh, not a polite one. I don't know what was said. I didn't ask. Some things belong to the people they happen between. But I saw Carol's face when she laughed like that, and she looked, just for a second, exactly the way she had looked at that inn the morning after the wedding, when she poured her tea and looked out the window at the frost on the grass and said, "Whatever happens, we're okay. You and me. We are okay. We are more than okay." I didn't need to ruin anyone to arrive here. I didn't need to raise my voice or press charges or make a scene at my son's wedding that his children might one day hear about. I needed to know what I knew, and wait, and be patient, and hold the line clearly and without apology. That's all it took. I know, I said to Carol that morning at the inn watching the frost. I know, I can see it.